Okay, so we're finally getting into some fun stuff right now because we're going to create our first ExpressTrade function, which is going to be a uh, inventory loader. We're going to have an input of a Steam ID, and we're going to return the inventory of the user that was given. And we're going to do this using a endpoint. We're going to create an endpoint for requesting the data, and then we're going to link a function to it that returns the data, preferably in JSON, so we can, or you can, because I'm not going to do it, that you have to do that yourself. You can then decode that the JSON into your front end and like show the inventory in a nice looking way. So the first thing that we'll have to do is probably write the function. So let's start with that. First of all, just create a function, name it whatever you'd like. I'm gonna name it retrieve inventory, and it's gonna be a function, and it's gonna have a input. We're going to need and use a Steam ID. You can also use a trade URL, but a Steam ID is is a lot more easier if you ask me. Okay, so we're going to work with promises. If you don't really know what a promise is, I just recommend you to first watch a video about promises. But we're going to need one because the ExpressTrade API is calling to endpoints as well, and it's not going to have any instant response. So we're going to have to use a promise to return our data. So let's just quickly write a promise, reject, and no, that's good. That's fine. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to go to the trade OP skins GitHub. Oh, sorry, trade OP skins API. This is where you can find everything you can do with the API. So you can these are all the endpoints that are possible with the API. It's a lot of them, so it's very customizable. It's not just the things I'm gonna make a video about. There's much more to do, so I'd recommend checking this out first. So we need to go and retrieve someone's inventory, so we probably need the trade. Yeah, we need the trade. So we are going to need this function, the get user inventory from Steam ID, because we have the Steam ID as input. So to now call this endpoint, let me just fix this up real quick. To call this endpoint, we are going to call first the object, the ExpressTrade, and then we are going to call the iTrade, because we're trying to access iTrade. So iTrade point dot get user inventory from Steam ID, and you can see these are all the inputs. These are the only two that are required. So let's quickly do that. Steam ID is gonna be Steam ID is gonna be the Steam ID given by our function, and the app ID, we're gonna use VGO items, so I think it's 1. For VGO items you just use 1, and we're gonna go with per page of 500, so it loads 500 items. And now it's gonna have a function or a callback, which is gonna be not like this. This is different than what the ExpressTrade API actually returns. It returns error body. This is what it actually returns. So, and I can show you. You're gonna have a status. If it's 1, it means it's succeeded. If it's not 1, it didn't succeed. So you probably want to reject the promise then. And then in the response object, you will find all the data you're actually requesting. So we will find the total, the items, the user data, and the sort parameters. So what we will then have to do is check if it actually loaded the inventory. So if let's say status, if the status, and then we're going to Now I'm stupid. We're going to use the status, of course, not the response. So status. And now, if the status is not 1, we want to reject the promise, and we want to return. So, and we probably want a error message in here. So, if the status isn't 1, I think pretty much always there's going to be a message attached to it. So we can just call body.message. You can read it like it's going to be 404 and stuff if the status isn't 1. So now what we just need to do is get the response data, and we're gonna resolve it, the promise. So body dot response, and then that's pretty much the whole function. So now what's gonna happen if the promise succeeds? It's gonna spit out all the returned data from this function, which is gonna be the user data, the items, the total, and the sort parameters. And if it does not succeed, it's gonna throw us an error. But first, to use this function in our endpoint, we're going to have to export it. So let's say retrieve inventory and retrieve inventory. So now we need to make a endpoint. So let's do that by just changing this one to get inventory. And then we need an input of a Steam ID. So let's say Steam ID. And or wait, we used the retrieve inventory function, so I can just call it retrieve. It doesn't matter, just call it anything you'd like. And now we're going to call the function, but because it's a promise, we are going to have to do it a little bit different. It's going to be trace.retrieve inventory, and then it's going to have an input of the Steam ID, and to access the parameters of these, you just access the request from the function, and then the params, or the parameters, and then the parameter we created, which is going to be Steam ID. And then if the promise succeeds, we are going to have a array of data, or an object. So let's just say response or something, or callback. We can call it callback. But we're also going to catch it if it returns an error. We are going to send to the server a object, because we are trying to use JSON or a format like JSON. Say error in a object, and then just show the error. And if it is successful, we're gonna send our callback. Okay, so what now should happen: if we succeed, we get the data, and if we don't, we get an object with an error. So let's just restart the server real quick. Okay, so there we go. So now let me just go to my inventory of my OP skins. I have a max 7, which is not much, but I have something. I'm pretty much rich right now. And now let me just get my Steam ID. There we go, I have my Steam ID now. So if you just look at what endpoint we wrote, it's retrieve inventory and then the Steam ID. So retrieve inventory and then the Steam ID. There you go, that's our inventory. So let's see if our item is in here. There it is, the max 7 battle scars, whatever. But we can also have a wrong input, for example. So let's say the Steam ID is something random we don't care about. It's just not what we were expecting. It's gonna say error, Steam ID input is of the wrong type. It's gonna just catch every error for us. So that's what I like about the API. With this data that gets returned, we can then use something like Ajax jQuery. We can use this to then get the data, convert it into an object, and then access the data from there. And we can then like make it look like it looks awesome. We can make custom styles for it and stuff. But this is just the basic of how to retrieve the data. And then we're pretty much done.